If I told you that you could be an NBA GM and you could look back in time over the last 50 years and choose the best number one overall NBA draft pick, but you had to choose one in order, who would your number one overall draft pick be? Would it be Shaq? Would it be Olajuwon? Would it be Patrick Ewing? Would it be Victor Wembanyama? Would it be LeBron James? Think about all the number one draft picks going all the way back to the mid 70s when the ABA and the NBA merged. What would be your number one draft pick as a prospect, right? We're ranking prospects, not what they did in their career, but what they were like the night before the draft. Who is the number one prospect in your book? That's what today's episode is about. Guys, I'm asking you to consider homage.com for all of your apparel needs. If you like these cool NBA Jam t-shirts like the one I'm wearing right here for the Philadelphia 76ers, there is a bevy of options at homage.com. And the great news about homage.com is I am an affiliate sponsor. The Cajun Cardboard channel is an affiliate sponsor of homage.com. And if you go into my YouTube description in the top right, you can click a link that'll direct you to homage.com. And then every purchase you make on the site supports the Cajun Cardboard channel. Hey guys, Brian with Cajun Cardboard coming at you from the great state of Louisiana, and we have got another episode of NBA Past and Present where two old guys, basketball lifers, myself and Coach Jonathan Pixley, talk about random basketball stuff. We're not going to talk about cards today. We're going to take a detour from all the card talk that you've seen on the channel lately, and we're going to talk about basketball, and we're going to talk about, it's NBA Past and Present, Jonathan. We're going to talk about the past. Today's episode's a cool one. I think we're on the same page as far as the criteria and the topic du jour. We are going to take every number one overall draft pick in the history of the NBA post-merger, which means, what did we say? David Thompson doesn't count. The next one does. What is it, John Lucas? I think we start with John Lucas.
1976. Yep.
Yeah, 1976. So the first NBA draft post-merger, meaning ABA-NBA merger, we're going to rank all of them, the top 10, our top 10, if they were all in a room, standing there, staring at us, and all we knew, this is not based on how they had a career, we're not going to put Jordan, Jordan was not number one, but we're not going to rank based on what they did. We're going to rank them based on how they were perceived as a prospect at the time leading into the draft, knowing what we knew and having the data that we had leading into the draft. Does that make sense?
100%. Yeah.
Okay, so we're not basing it based on what they actually did. We are putting ourselves in the shoes of a fantasy GM, and you can only choose from, what did we say, 1976? So that's about 47, 48, something like that, draft, number one overall draft picks. We're going to rank our 10 best prospects, and then we're going to rank our 5 worst prospects, and then we've also got 5 honorable mention for our top 10 best prospects. So that's just kind of how we're going to do it. We're going to kind of chat through it, and we'll buffer our assertions and some of our thinking. Was this tough for you? Tell me, well, how do you want to start? You want to start with the best or the worst? Let's start with the best.
I was going to say, I think we start with our honorable mentions.
Honorable mention best. Yeah.
And I'm glad that we decided to go the direction that we did, because if we based it on their career, then it would just turn into a greatest player of all time thing.
Thank you. Yeah, we would just be, that's no fun. In hindsight, anybody can go pull up stats and we can argue about Shaq and Duncan and do it that way. But we want to kind of take a little Michael J. Fox DeLorean time machine back in time and just pretend all these guys were available in the same draft. Right. Based on what we saw and what we thought and what we knew about these guys coming out of college, who would you rank in order best to worst? So that's kind of the thought process here. So
we have to clear this up though, because they are all in one room right now.
Yeah.
But we do also have to take into account, like, the way that we view them in this moment is how they were viewed coming out of college, obviously, or maybe international, whatever it is we decided to go with, and how they would have affected the game that they were coming into then, right? So we do take into account to a degree. But ultimately, who was the best prospect when they came out? That's it.
That's it. Who was the most can't miss, highest floor, highest ceiling, most certainty, most upside, who would have affected your franchise the most? Like, in other words, number one of the last 48 of number one overall draft picks. All right, let's get cranking. Let's start with honorable mention. We're on the same page with all that. And then when we do the worst, it's going to be funny. We're just going to do our 5 worst number one overall draft picks, keeping in mind some of these number one overall draft picks made buku money and actually had okay, NBA careers, just depending on who you put in your top 5. But let's get cranking with honorable mention. Let's just put it this way. My 5 honorable mention are all, I think they're all first ballot Hall of Famers. They're certainly all Hall of Famers. They're probably all first ballot Hall of Famers, if I had to guess. Go ahead.
Mine are definitely not. Mine are strictly based on prospects when they came out. And again, I think it's important because somebody may hear, okay, the best prospect when they came out, but they're all in one room right now. We're not drafting people to play in the space and pace game right now.
Thank you. Yeah.
We're drafting based on prospects when they came out for that era. Okay. So I'm going to shock everybody with my first honorable mention, and that is Victor Wembanyama. And
here we go.
He went from where I was contemplating. We talked about it yesterday. I was contemplating putting him at number 1 on my list. But you did bring up a great point. We haven't seen him play basketball, really. Not real basketball. Even though, it's maybe, and I misspoke yesterday when I said widely agreed upon that he's the greatest prospect in the history of professional sports. But it has been at least alluded to, right? So for me to put him as honorable mention strictly means we don't know yet. And so I've got 10 guys that I felt like when they were coming out and made themselves eligible for the draft, I was like, this dude's these
guys can't miss.
Right.
Could Victor Wembanyama, this is how this video started. This is how the idea popped in my head because we all heard it. I can't remember which dumbass talking head said it, but somebody came out and said he's the greatest pro sports prospect of all time. Right. And I was like, well, Wilt Chamberlain was a prospect. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was a prospect. LeBron James was a prospect. Shaquille O'Neal, to name another, is a prospect. Those guys were pretty good. And then, you do have guys in other sports like Bo Jackson. I mean, dude, Gretzky was scoring hundreds of goals in youth hockey. So I don't even want to get into all that crap. But if we just talk about basketball, that's how we got to this because I was like, that's interesting. I'm pretty open-minded and I realize he's doing things. And I sort of even made a video on my channel. I probably should have told you that I made it. I know you don't collect cards, but you would have liked this video. And it was basically me begging the world, please stop comparing Victor Wembanyama to Ralph Sampson. Please don't do that. Please don't just take someone's height, weight, and skin color and say, that's the comp. It's not. That's not the comp. Yep. Because guess what? Victor Wembanyama in a 40-second clip will do 35 things that Ralph Sampson could never, on his best day, ever consider imagining doing. So they're not the same player. But it is interesting on my list. I have no problem with you having Wembanyama in your honorable mention. He's not in my honorable mention. He is in my top 10, so we'll get to that. But that's kind of how we got here is because Wembanyama was the thought is like, well, if Wembanyama is a great prospect, but what are some of these other great prospects? And then we were like, well, what are the 10 best number 1 overall prospects? And again, remember on this list, you're not going to get Jordan. You're not going to get, go down the list. There's a long list of guys. You're not going to get Bird. You're not going to get a lot of number 1, guys that weren't number 1 draft picks, but are top 10 players of all time. You don't get Kobe. You don't get Steph Curry. You don't get, you don't even get Kevin Durant, believe it or not, right? Maybe you should have, but you don't. So my honorable mention, my number 5 is Yao Ming. I don't know if you have Yao in your top 10. I have Yao because when he came again, just like with Victor being in your honorable mention, the only reason is uncertainty. If we had seen 1 year of Victor Wembanyama playing at fill in the blank, Oklahoma State or Alabama, we would have a much better idea of what he is, right? And he may jump into the top 10, or he may clearly put himself out of the top 10. But right now, we just don't know. Yao Ming was very similar. Now, we had seen clips, and you can't, there's no uncertainty about being 7'5" and 315 pounds or whatever the hell he was. So the one thing we were sure about is he could shoot the piss out of the ball, and he was gigantic. What we weren't sure about was exactly how slow is this guy, and will he be able to thrive and survive on an NBA court? And as it turned out, he more than did, his fair share, and he was a top 15, number 1 overall pick post-merger, in my personal opinion. He was just so big, and when you see pictures of him next to Shaq, again, I'm looking at how high is the floor, right? Does that make sense? Like, I think he's a cannot miss because he's just so damn big, and he shoots the ball so damn well, high 80s from the free throw line, plus 50% from, he could even step out to 18, 19, 20 feet, and you can't contest his shot. So we weren't real sure defensively. He ended up being okay defensively. We weren't real sure defensively, but we sort of knew offensively. But even then, he was doing it against little Asian dudes over in the Chinese league, which wasn't what it is now. Not that it's anything now, but it was even worse back then. So he's kind of my version of Wembanyama. We just didn't have a lot of data, but he checked a lot of the measurables.
There's my issue is I had no data, and I'm actually taking myself back to when a guy like Yao Ming came out. And it was really, I think, Yao Ming comes out today, it's a totally different world for him. Now, granted, he still was the number 1 pick, but you would have a lot more data, like you say, on him today than you did back then.
Yeah.
Because the world's competition wasn't nearly as strong then as it is now.
Yeah.
So that's why I didn't even have him in my honorable mention. But, it's funny, I didn't have him in my honorable mention, but I contemplated putting him in my top 10 overall initially, but I got stuck in the mindset of what he ended up being as opposed to what I thought about him when he was coming in. So I had to back out.
The hard part. The hard part is putting out like taking out what they actually did and going back in time before they've done anything and kind of taking a snapshot of who they were and what they were capable of and what everybody thought of them and what I thought of them as a prospect at any given point in time, the night before the draft. Here's the deal. Yao Ming. We knew less about Yao Ming than we know about Victor Wembanyama.
A lot
Less, right? Because we've seen Victor Wembanyama destroy 2 G League teams in back-to-back nights. We've seen Victor Wembanyama play every single game for his pro team. The French League, I don't know how it compares to the CBA, the old Chinese Basketball Association, where Yao Ming was playing before he came over, but I'm assuming it's probably a little bit better. Again, I'm not sure any of that really matters. It's not Division I, Big 5 conference stuff. But we know more about Victor Wembanyama, as funny as that is, when we really know nothing, than we did about Yao Ming at the time. So I think those guys are both good comps for our honorable mention, and for very similar reasons. They check all the measurables. And again, just to be clear, they're almost the same height. That's kind of scary given the things that we've seen Victor Wembanyama do and the way we've seen him move laterally next to Yao Ming. The difference between Yao Ming and Wembanyama is I think Victor Wembanyama is an all-NBA defender the first day he sets foot on the floor in the NBA. I think he'll either lead the league in block shots or he'll finish, maybe second behind maybe a young Chet Holmgren if he can stay healthy, because those guys are very switchable, very flexible. They're both bean poles. They both need to eat a few sandwiches and drink some protein shakes. But this first year, the one thing that's going to translate, I know, is shot blocking and defense and switching pick and rolls and playing drop coverage and all the things. Those guys are going to be very, very, very good at that. Offensively, we just got to see where they're at, because they are frail.
I do think both of those guys, I'm not sure which one, it'll be 1 and 2, I think, will be also the most dunked on players next year.
That's a great point. Victor Wembanyama he may have the most highlights and have the most highlight facial posterized situations, because I do think he's got that. He and Chet both had that deal where I can block everything. And Mutombo had that. Ewing had that. All the great ones had that. And that's why you see those guys. Dwight Howard had that. All those guys, you see them on the most posters, but you also remember those guys fondly as some of the greatest shot blockers that ever lived. All right, next, honorable mention.
All right, so I'm going to continue with my controversial honorable mention picks.
Okay.
And this is going to be a tough one for people to accept. It was tough for me to write the letters HM next to this dude's name, and that is Ben Simmons.
Okay.
And I did it with Ben because you and I both agreed at the time, right, when he was coming out, we're like, look, even if he can never shoot a jump shot, okay, he still is a lock as a defender, passer, rebounder, all-around talent, athlete, right? He's a game changer. And if you do want to base it on, which we didn't, obviously, his level of productivity, I mean, his first 3 years in the league, he was all of those things, right?
Yeah.
And so I thought he deserved, from when I remember him as a prospect, and you and I also have the advantage, maybe disadvantage at this point, of having seen him on the Nike circuit too, right? And seen him do some other things that people have still not gotten to see him do, like shoot jump shots and be productive with it. And I think that I had to put him on this list because I was like, if I'm just talking prospect, I mean, this guy, when he was coming out, we were like, holy crap, is he, is he LeBron, but just not as good of a shooter, but maybe a better passer and a better defender? Like, who is he? So
much bigger. How about just saying he's bigger than LeBron? And people were like, what are you talking about? LeBron's freaking huge. Yeah. Well, Ben Simmons is like 6'10" and a half, you know, and gets from end to end like LeBron. Here's the deal with Ben Simmons, and he would be 16th. You know, he'd be my first honorable mention out, and I had him in there, and then I switched it up. The one thing that did worry me coming out of college, now I didn't know he was going to be a mental basket case and flame out the way he did, to where now you and I are both, I think, on the same page that I don't think Ben Simmons just gives a damn about playing basketball. Like, I just don't think he knows that. I didn't know that coming out of college, but the fact that, how it ended at LSU worried me, and that was sort of the first indication that there may be more to the story here. He may not have that alpha gene. He may not have that. But that being said, you're right, Jonathan. Let me pull him up here on basketballreference.com, because he came into the league guns blazing, and people don't realize he was an absolute freak from day one. I mean, the dude was he didn't play, right? We know he was injured, so he missed his rookie season, and then, of course, he won Rookie of the Year, and everybody joked about how many times does this guy get to try to win Rookie of the Year. But he was basically 16, 8, and 8, shooting 56% from the field. 55% from the field. I mean, that doesn't happen. Like, he's winning Rookie of the Year like 9 out of 10 years when you go 16, 8, and 8, and you're the second best player on your NBA team. You know,
and a top 5 defender in the league.
And a top 5 defender in the league, in the entire league. The most switchable, the most versatile defender probably in the entire NBA, along with Giannis, but maybe even more so than Giannis. Better, to be honest with you, he's probably better at guarding small perimeter guys than Giannis was. And then if you'll look on the screen, you'll notice at age 22, 23, and 24, all-star, 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 and more of the same. 17, 9, and 8, 16, 8, and 8. Then he kind of dips, and then all hell breaks loose, and that's the end of it, right? And now we don't know if he even cares about playing basketball. So enough about Ben Simmons. I'm with you. I think that's a great pick there. The only reason he didn't is because I've got some other really good guys. I've got Derrick Rose in my honorable mention, Jonathan. I don't have Derrick Rose in my top 10. Again, this is a deal where we're splitting hairs. Now, one thing you're going to notice about my list is I am very biased on bigs because most of the guys that are in my top 10, we knew they were going to be game-changing players at the rim on one half of the floor. We may not have known how my bigs were going to translate offensively and whether they were going to be greatest of all time offensively or just very good offensively. But we knew one thing: they were franchise cornerstones on the defensive end. We didn't know that, and Derrick Rose obviously is not a great defensive player. And we also didn't know coming out of college if Derrick Rose could shoot. So that's the only thing that keeps Derrick Rose out of the top 10. And again, this is a weird little game, a weird little mind exercise where we're trying to forget that he was an MVP. We're trying to forget how explosive he was. We're trying to forget that he did figure it out and the game did click. But he's a little guy by number 1 overall draft pick standards, right? He's a big guy, right? By human being standards, walking on the street, Derrick Rose is a big guy. But like by these standards, I'm always going to hedge risk and take the monster. So, in fact, looking at my list, I'm just going to give you – there's only two – there's no guard. Well, there's one guard. There's one guard on my list, and he's a Giants. So on my top 10 list. So Derrick Rose is on my honorable mention. Again, no slight to Derrick Rose. And again, this is not a disparagement about Derrick Rose and how his career ended up, although he did make buku money. Just at the time, I don't think as a number one overall prospect he would fit into my top 10, but he's right there on the outside looking in.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on this. Is I think maybe the only guard I had on my list too.
Okay.
On my next honorable mention, and by the way, real quick, and I know we don't like talking about Ben Simmons very much, but people don't realize when that dude was coming out of college, and I think I'm accurate about this. I think he's one of only two guys in the history of college basketball to average 20, 10, and 5. And I think Oscar Robertson was the other one, right?
Wow.
So I'm like, take those things into account. But okay, along your Derrick Rose line, I had Allen Iverson on my list, on my honorable mention, just because he's tiny, but he is so dynamic in college. You know, he was so dynamic.
Yeah.
I mean, he's going to be special in the league. I don't know if he's a winner. I don't know these, but he's going to be a special player. So I had him on there for similar reasons why you had Derrick Rose.
Very similar. We don't know if he can shoot. We know he scored the shit out of it at the college level, but what happens when everybody's 4 inches taller? What happens when every single person that plays his position, which is not point guard, by the way, it's shooting guard, goes at him over and over and over and over? You worry about durability. You worry about width and thickness and size. You worry about what if he is Kemba Walker? What if he shoots 38 and 39% for his entire career? And he wasn't a great, field goal percentage shooter, but Iverson obviously ended up being, where do you put Iverson in all time based on paper resume? 25 to 40?
I was going to say 30 to 35 for me.
30 to 35, something like that. He's not in my top 20 for sure, but he's also not outside the top 50. Let's just be safe and say there. So he ended up being everything that you would want a number one overall pick to be, not to mention putting asses in the seats, to being the face of your franchise, to changing, a culture. And just, dude, I mean, he had the alpha gene. He had the alpha gene, man. And he may not like to practice, right? We know he may not like to practice, but that sucker, when the lights turned on and the ball went up, that sucker played, and he played through everything. So Iverson's a good one. Iverson and Rose are what and what. They're kind of the same player coming out. I was like, man, just too small. And Rose is a lot bigger than Iverson. But same kind of deal is like, what if they can't shoot? What if they are Marcus Smart? What if they're not Iverson and Rose? What if they're Marcus Smart, right? Because we thought Marcus Smart was Derrick Rose. And then, obviously Marcus Smart's now Marcus Smart. Next one for me is Blake Griffin. Blake Griffin's in my honorable mention. He did everything that you could ask somebody to do in college. He looked the part, and add him to the list of guys that kind of missed their rookie season. I think he fractured his leg or something landing from a dunk. But Blake Griffin makes my honorable mention. He does not make my top 10. He makes your top 10 based on your no.
Oh, he didn't even make my honorable mention, and I'm realizing I missed.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Look, him and Iverson and Ben Simmons, those three were like, God, these guys were, in my opinion, these were the clear-cut number one overall picks. But again, you're splitting hairs here. You're talking about the 15 greatest of the 48 that have ever been taken. It's just hard. Somebody's going to miss out. So Blake Griffin misses out for me.
Yeah. So I'm going to tell you, my next one was Anthony Davis.
Me too.
And I felt like defensively, worst case scenario. Defensively, they were saying he was the next Bill Russell. And just watching him, and then I'll be honest with you, when I started seeing clips on social media of him like playing one-on-one, and having guard skills and all those things, it was crazy to watch that stuff. I was like, oh, okay, didn't know he could do all that stuff either. Granted, it's a freaking driveway game, but nonetheless, just watching him dominate college basketball on one end, and then this is going to sound super, super nitpicky, but I remember watching him shoot free throws in games, and I was like, okay, he could be a serviceable shooter by the time he's in the league, right?
Yeah. So
I looked at him and was like, yeah, he's a lock. He's going to be a good pro, a really, really good pro. Didn't know that we would have all the injuries and all those things, but still, I mean, he's been a super productive pro. There's no.
I didn't know he was going to be as good. I mean, again, he's a tough one because he's been injured so much, and everybody's down on him, and he's the black sheep and whatever. But I just worried that somebody who was wasn't even the first or second or third option really offensively at Kentucky. Like, that worries me. It just wasn't a large sample size. And so that's why he's an honorable mention instead of my top 10, because everybody else that's in my top 10 was unquestionable, certain, can't miss. And so I think the comp for Anthony Davis was kind of Tim Duncan, but Tim Duncan had a much larger sample size. And to be fair to Anthony Davis, he could clearly do things that Cal didn't let him do. He could clearly do things offensively that we never got to see in college. But that's part of the deal, and that's part of this little mind exercise that we're playing, is we never got to see it. And so I didn't see him destroy the SEC. I saw him average 14 points a game, primarily on dunks and the occasional jab, step, jump shot. And he was just a mediocre free throw shooter. So, I didn't see high 80s free throw percentage to make me think, oh, this guy's going to be able to step out and shoot it from 21, which ironically in his career he's done and now he can't do. It's very strange. It's almost like LeBron, right? Like, he can't shoot. Oh, shit, yes, he can, but now he can't again. And I don't understand that, how mechanically they can break down like that. Maybe they're head cases, I don't know. But, Anthony Davis definitely squarely belongs in mine. Right in smack in the middle of my honorable mention with you. Next one, what do we have, 2 left? No, 1 left. I've got 1 left. One left. I got Dwight Howard in there. Not a huge sample size. If I'd seen, 2 years of Dwight Howard destroying people in college, fine. But he was, of that era coming out. It just, when I saw his body, I was like, well, this just is not normal, and I knew immediately defensively, this is what I go back to. And I know it's funny because how much I don't care about defense as a player at all, like outscore your opponent and you're good with me, right? I'm almost like the Mike D'Antoni of podcasters, but we knew Dwight Howard was going to be absolutely ridiculous defensively. And we knew he was NBA body ready from day one, and he was a true center. With Anthony Davis, he did have the 1 year at Kentucky. We didn't know if he was a center or a power forward. And really, you had the same question marks offensively, probably more question marks offensively about Dwight Howard than about Anthony Davis. But Dwight Howard got to the NBA, and people make jokes about Dwight Howard because he's a freaking weirdo, right? And he's got some weird tendencies and some weird stories, about him. And he's a basket case and a weirdo, just kind of generally speaking, and made some stupid decisions, and probably wanted the ball more than he deserved throughout his career. But Dwight Howard had an unbelievable NBA career, and he was a horrific oversight on that NBA 75th anniversary team, in my opinion. He absolutely, unquestionably belongs on that team, no matter what you think about him. And I'm being objective because I'm not a huge Dwight Howard fan at all. Right. You think he belonged on that team?
100%. I didn't have him in honorable mention, and the only reason, again, coming out of high school, to me, you had to be a household name coming out of high school for me to put you on this list. Okay. Now, again, he's another guy. If we base it on his productivity in the league, he's in my top 10, right? But
probably
I didn't do it. So, yeah, but nonetheless, look, I can't argue with it for sure because, like you said, he looked like a 25-year-old grown man coming out of high school,
Eight-time All-Star, 5-time rebound champ, won a title sort of, led the league in blocks twice, 8-time All-NBA. That 8-time All-NBA right there for a center has got to get you consideration for that top 75th team. That is 8-time All-NBA is very different than 8-time All-Star. Those are two very, very different things. 3-time Defensive Player of the Year. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I should be better at this, but 3-time Defensive Player of the Year winners, like that list has got to be pretty freaking short. You know it. Ben Wallace.
Ben Wallace was 4 times, or Mutombo. One of them was 3. The other one was 4. Mutombo, and I think that might be it.
Okay, so take Ben Wallace and Mutombo defensively, and then go ahead and average, 18 points a game for a decade. Those guys didn't. Those guys weren't even remotely close to what Dwight Howard did offense. Obviously Ben Wallace didn't even play offense, but like Mutombo offensively. And by the way, those guys didn't rebound like Dwight Howard either. I know we remember Ben Wallace as the other Rodman, right, and this incredible rebounder, and he was only rebounding and still didn't rebound at the rate that Dwight Howard did. I think Dwight Howard belongs in that 75th anniversary team. All right.
Yeah, I agree.
That's it for my honorable mention. Did you have one more?
I have one more, and I'm positive you're going to have this guy in your top 10. And I just based it on sample size. And I also remember thinking when he was in college, I already detected this dude's a little off. He's got some weird stuff going on. So, and I don't think he's the best player in the draft coming out. So I put Greg Oden on my honorable mention. And I'm going to tell you right now, it was hard for me to put him in there. It was hard for me to put a couple of these guys in there because there's two dudes that I left out that I remember thinking when they were in college, I was like, these dudes are going to be ridiculous. One was Larry Johnson, okay, at UNLV, and the other one was Derek Coleman. And I remember being a huge Larry Johnson fan in college, and everybody was like, oh, yeah, but he might be too small, this, that, the other, or too short, right? And I just remember going, nah, he's going to – and both of those guys had great careers. But Greg Oden was a freak, an absolute freak, right?
He's the butt of a joke now. He's the butt of a joke. People are like, oh, he's the next Greg Oden. Like, no, y'all don't realize, but for the injury, Greg Oden is Patrick Ewing. Like, that's what people don't understand. As a prospect, I watched him play against Florida in that national title game, and he didn't have a great game, but just watching him play defense, you were watching something transcendent. You were literally watching something transcendent on the defensive side of the ball. And you know my bias on this list is that one thing that travels and that you can obviously pick out in college was defensive prowess and the fact that, you're 7'1", 300 pounds and move like Anthony Davis. He basically was a bigger version of Anthony Davis. That's what I saw, a much, much bigger version of Anthony Davis. There's his college stats, Jonathan. He played 32 games at Ohio State. No indication that durability or he was injury prone. Nothing like that. Nothing like that existed at the time. It's easy in hindsight to forget about that stuff, but played every game for Ohio State. He was 19 years old in the Big Ten, and he shot 62% from the field, dunked everything in sight, did the same thing in high school, averaged 16 and 9. We tend to forget he also had a great wingspan. He was a legit 7 foot 250. Legit 7 foot 250 as a 19-year-old kid. So much bigger than Dwight Howard, much bigger than Anthony Davis, much bigger than Tim Duncan. Like, he was a legit, true franchise center size. And remember, he came out in an era where you were still looking for center. Like, you were looking for 5-man-1 titles still at that point, because Shaq had just gone through his deal with Kobe or whatever. So Greg Oden, I'll just spoiler alert. Greg Oden's number 10 on my list, man. We've talked enough about him, but Greg Oden is number 10 on my list. And it's really a shame because the dude, I can't remember what it was, but it was lower leg injuries. It's been so long, but he kept trying to come back and trying to come back and trying to come back. And he just kept freaking doing it over and over again. It was maddening. It was very Sam Bowie-like. And now I'm looking at Greg Oden. I've got his entire NBA career pulled up. And basically, prime years, he played 82 games. What a coincidence. Like, that's it. He played one season worth of games and was not himself in those seasons. So we just never got to see it, man. At least with Brandon Roy and some of these other guys we got to see before the injury. Grant Hill, we know what he was going to be. With Greg Oden, the world will never remember him, and the world will never know what he could have been.
100%.
Very sad. Yep, he's number 10. Who's number 10 on your top 10 list?
So number 10 on my top 10 list is shocking. If you've watched this channel before, you will struggle to believe that I put him on here, is Zion. I put him number 10 on my list. Even though, because look, you can't argue with athleticism. You can't argue with, the fact that he could already handle the ball. He couldn't shoot, still can't. But those things, in my opinion, as long as he stayed healthy, and the reality is we saw him blow his shoe out, but he didn't get hurt in college. And it was a year, right? So I was like, okay, he comes out, dude. You can't argue. You cannot argue with the fact. Like, the people that were in the camp of Ja Morant should be the number 1 pick, I was like, that's crazy. Ja Morant's going to be a really good player, but that's crazy, right? So I had Zion number 10 on my list.
I had. I'll be honest with you. I would have taken Ja number 1. And I would have looked like a genius for a little bit, and now we would both look like idiots. So that's one of those deals. But I had concerns about Zion because I don't think he can dribble and I don't think he can shoot. And I think those are probably the two most important skills in basketball today. If he was being drafted in 1986, I think he could have had a Barkley-like impact and done those types of things. His shooting mechanic, Jonathan, the reason I don't have him even in my top 15 is because I was kind of down on him from day one. I just don't think anybody who can't straighten their little chubby arms can be a great basketball player. Now, I'm wrong. He's got all NBA ability. He's just that physically gifted. But I would be concerned about longevity. I would be concerned about a lack of true skill set. I mean, it's the same reason that I say I'm concerned about Giannis long-term, Now, Giannis has obviously built up a significantly different resume than Zion did. And Giannis is a great passer, and he's also got an 8-foot wingspan, so it's a whole different deal. But I worry about guys that can't shoot or dribble long term. I just do. I just don't think their games are going to age very well unless they're 7'4" or something.
I think he handles the ball well. I think he handles it well enough for what he does. Right. Well, think about it. When he's been healthy, who has ever stopped him from getting to the rim?
I know, but Jonathan, he's 21, 22 years old. That's what I'm saying is when he's 28 and he's not going by people and he weighs 299 instead of 279. You know what I'm saying? Like Clyde Drexler could dribble twice and get to the rim and dunk everything too, but that dude can't dribble. Dominique Wilkins could get to the rim when he was young. He can't dribble. That's what worries me about Zion.
Did you see all those things, though, when he was a prospect? That's what I'm guessing or asking. Did you see, like, he's going to eat his way out of the league? He's a big guy.
I didn't know that. And I was the guy that defended the guy. I was like, please stop saying somebody's injury prone because they're fat. Charles Barkley was very fat. There's been other heavy players. Like people are saying Victor Wembanyama is going to get injured. Why? Because he's tall? Right. Guess what? Everybody on my list is tall, and they all had first ballot Hall of Fame careers. I was like, you can't just throw out injury prone because somebody's tall or fat. You can't do that. It doesn't make any sense. God makes different people's bodies different. Different obstacles appear in people's path. Fluke thing. Like Grant Hill had the greatest NBA physique in the world, Grant Hill, and he could do everything and play every position. And that guy just had one horrific ankle injury. Brandon Roy. I mean, you can go down the list, man. I don't think anybody is prone to injury simply based on what they're shaped like. I just don't believe it. I do, again, Zion is a little bit different, right? Because he is extremely, extremely heavy, and he lands from significantly higher than most people his weight ever have. Right. So that does make him different. But he had blew out the one shoe. I don't remember him being like repeatedly, successively injured in high school. But maybe, again, I'm not the expert on that. I just worried about him because he's short. He's got a short wingspan. He can't. I didn't think he could dribble at all. 1-2 dribbles max, and then I know he can't shoot, and I know he never will be able to shoot. He will never be able to shoot a basketball proficiently.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
Yeah. Number 9 give me number 9 on your list, and I'll give you number 9 on mine.
So number 9 on my list was Chris Webber. Whenever he came out of Michigan, people remember him in the Fab Five, but he actually, he played 2 years at Michigan, and both years they went to national title games. And I know everybody remembers him for the timeout and this and that. But the fact remains that Michigan team, from a talent standpoint, yes, Juwan Howard had a good NBA career. Jalen Rose had a good NBA career. But they act like this Fab Five that they had was just loaded. Those other two guys, Ray Jackson and Jimmy King, were good players, but they weren't NBA players, right?
Right.
There have been much more talented starting fives that have played.
Much more. Right.
And Chris Webber was the reason why they were a national championship contender both years he was there. And he could dribble. And no, he couldn't shoot, threes, but he could make a mid-range shot. He was he probably was on a good free throw shooter in college. But the point was, you could project that he would be able to do some of those things at the NBA level. And he was a great defender, right? And physically, he was a freak. Now, he wasn't.
He was ready. He was ready physically.
He was ready right then from day one. Yeah.
Crazy how early he was trading his career, and a lot of that had to do with his mental psyche and off the court stuff. Not that he was a bad dude off the court, but I think he may have had some friction with teammates and management and stuff like that. I don't have Webber in my honorable mention or in my top 10, but we're splitting hairs here, man. Like, I don't have Iverson either, and that's like, I know this is going to sound like sacrilege, and people are going to be screaming at the monitor like, "What the f is wrong with you?" But like, just listen to the rest of the list and kind of remember how highly revered some of these guys were. I mean, Webber was great. Webber is a Hall of Famer, but every single person on my list is, except for Odin, pretty much, So I can definitely see Webber being in that tail end of the top 10 or in the honorable mention for sure, because he was certainly a can't miss. As far as his floor was very, very high. And we got to see 2 full years of him at the highest level in college, and he did what he needed to do. By the way, I was in the Superdome at the game where he called the timeout. Jonathan, I was sitting so far up. I was the very top row behind the goal where he called the timeout. I had to watch the game on the Jumbotron. I was so far away. The Superdome is not, for those of you not from New Orleans or have never been there, not a great place to watch a basketball game. Football, you can get away with. Basketball, little tiny dots running around in different colors, and you can't tell who's who. I had no idea what Weber did. I thought Weber mouthed off to the referee or they called it travel because he did. But as it turns out, that night on the radio, and back then we, no internet. So we're listening to sports radio on the way home, trying to get out of the parking lot. They told us he called a timeout, and that's what the technical was for. But we didn't know what was going on at the time. I was at that game with my mom. I'll never forget that game. Great game. Great. I'm not at very many games in person. I like to watch them on TV, but that was one that I'll never forget being at. It was really cool. So number 9 on my list is Ralph Sampson. I got to believe you're going to have him higher on your list, aren't you? Yeah, because I was young, right? I'm old. I'm 49. You're 49. We're old, but dude, Ralph Sampson coming out of college was the next in the great line of lineage of great centers. I mean, you go Russell, you go Wilt, you go Kareem, you go. We'll skip over a few, but then you'll go Walton, and then Ralph Sampson's right there, dude. That's how revered he was in college. If I pull up his college numbers, listen to these. And you got 4 years to see him, right? Because he's old school. So you got 4 years of Ralph Sampson playing every freaking game, 132 games in 4 years. And again, that's where saying somebody's injury prone because they're tall and skinny is just dumb to me. He shot 55% every single year, shot 60% his senior year. He got better every year. Which a lot of players don't when they end up having to spend 4 years. And he was 11-plus rebounds every single year in what at the time was probably the toughest conference, at least in the mix. And he was on the best, either the best or one of the top 5 best teams in the country. Virginia was a powerhouse during his era. So you're 15-11, 18, 17-11, 16-11, and then 19-11. And always in the hunt for the national title. He was a clear-cut number 1. There was never any conversation about anybody else. He was the tallest player that had come out, and that was a really big deal because, remember, he's coming out, in that beginning of that great center era, like that early 80s drafts is when all these great centers started to show up with Ewing and a little bit later, Ewing and Olajuwon and David Robinson, and then, of course, Shaq in the early 90s. But, Ralph Sampson's number 9 on my list. You may have him higher. In fact, it could be – I could definitely see him being pushing the top 5 on my list. Not top 3 or 4, but top 5 for sure.
So what I want you to keep in mind about this, and I'm not sure exactly the year, but those numbers from a scoring standpoint are very leading, because there was no three-point line then, so they packed everything in defensively. B, he didn't have another pro on his team. Okay.
No.
C, I don't think there was a shot clock then. And so the game was a lot slower, especially when you're playing against him and you're trying to keep the ball away from him, right? I remember NC State did that to him in the NCAA tournament and beat him, or maybe the ACC tournament and beat him. But no, Sampson was, from a prospect standpoint, he's 3-time National Player of the Year, dude. 3.
That's my point. Like he was, he had all the credentials, right? All the credentials. Let me ask you this question. He's a Hall of Famer. We know that. Is he a Hall of Famer? Let's say he came, let's just pretend. Let's say he came straight out of high school. Is he a Hall of Famer?
Oh, well, are you basing it on the fact that his pro career ended up being injury prone?
It wasn't that injury. It was injury prone, yes. But, I'm basing it on the fact that he was 16-9, never won anything, and had a 16 PER. I don't think he's a Hall of Famer, but for his – because remember, it's the Naismith Hall of Fame. It's not the NBA Hall of Fame. I guess my question is, he is only a Hall of Famer based on his outstanding, unparalleled college credentials, not his NBA career, basically.
Bill Walton as well, right? Because
100% same exact story. Yes, now Walton won a title and he was the alpha, and so he does have something to show for it. But I'm looking at Ralph Sampson's pro career. He did make 4 All-Star teams to start his career, and then I guess that's where injuries kicked in. Shockingly, he didn't block very many shots in an era where people block a lot of shots, and he only blocked 2.4 and then 2 and then never again. And so it kind of tailed down. Makes me think maybe his injuries just sort of caught up to him. What's funny is, like we said, he played every game in college, or damn near every game in college, and then he played 82 his first 2 years in the NBA, and then everything's downhill from there. And so again, I don't think that's an NBA Hall of Fame career. I just think he was so freakish in college that that's everything. 3-time National Player of the Year is just, that's not normal, right? And of course, we'll never see that again because people will leave. If you're in college 3 years, that means you're never going to be the number one. You're no number one overall pick will ever play 3 years of college basketball unless something very drastic changes about the rules of eligibility. Right. Number 8 on your list. Is this 8?
Number 8 on my list was Tim Duncan. And I even struggled with this a little bit. I almost had Tim Duncan in my honorable mention because coming out of college, I mean, obviously he was super productive. He was also 22 years old when he came out, right? So I was like, okay, he's going to be a really good pro. His senior year, though, in college changed a lot for me because I actually saw him play a pretty good bit.
Yeah.
And he was very, very dominant. And I think it's the same story that we've told a few times already. Defensively, you knew he was dominant right off the bat, right?
Yeah.
But he started making mid-range jump shots and doing some different things. The thing that I was worried about was he had very little lift. And obviously he made that work for a long, long time. So, I looked at it also. Chris Webber was a much better athlete than Tim Duncan was whenever he was in college, but Chris Webber wasn't like a high flyer, right?
No.
So I kind of looked at that as well. But Tim Duncan was number 8 on my list as far as when he was coming out. I was like, you know what? I think he's got a chance. And I'm biased too because I did, before I got hurt, get a workout with the Spurs.
Yeah.
And I was thinking one of the reasons that they're even entertaining the fact that I might be somebody that they may look at is because they just drafted Tim Duncan.
Yeah.
With David Robinson is going to get double teamed every time.
Yeah, exactly.
They need little white people to make threes.
Hey, yeah, little 6'4", 225-pound white people to go stand in the corner, right? Little white people, right? Exactly. That was the era. That was the not the tail end, but that was kind of smack dab in the middle of the inside out era, right? I mean, he was a 96, 97 senior. That was just after the Rockets inside out of the shit out of everybody 2 years in a row, right? Where it's just throw it into the dream, let the dream work, and the dream's either going to destroy you or somebody's going to be wide open, and this guy's special enough to find everybody and always make the right pass. So Duncan in college, I've got his numbers pulled up. He was younger than you think. He was 20 as a senior. So he came over from the Virgin Islands. Yeah, he came over from the Virgin Islands real young, 17 as a freshman. And was 10-10. Okay, so that should have been an indication. But look at his numbers, how much better they get every single year, except for his free throw percentage, which got significantly worse, which is very odd. Yeah. 10-10, 16-12.5, 17-12.5, 19-12, and then 20-15. I don't remember him putting up offensive numbers like that his senior year, and he did it with honestly a good Wake team, but not nearly as much around him as some of these other guys that we're going to see on our list. For Weber, for instance, had significantly much more stuff around him. And, of course, that has a tendency to inflate your numbers as well. Duncan, completely consistent. I've got him number 7 on my list, so he's just one off for me. Number 8 on my list is the aforementioned Wembanyama, and it's just because I'm okay with the uncertainty offensively surrounding him because I think that Victor Wembanyama defensively is transcendent. I don't think he's good. I think he's great.
I need you to pause this for just a second. So
yeah, of course.
Give me 1 second.
I'm going to keep going without him. The reason that I've got Victor Wembanyama ahead of players like Ralph Sampson, Greg Oden, Yao Ming, Derrick Rose, Anthony Davis, Blake Griffin, Dwight Howard. I don't know if Victor Wembanyama is going to be a better player than those players, but I do know he's going to be a better defensive player than those players. I don't know it, but I honestly believe, barring injury, he steps in day one. He's an all-NBA defender at some level because it's not just being tall and having long arms. It is the shot-blocking instincts that I've seen in sufficient quantity of watching some clips, some highlights, a few French League games, the 2 G League games in their entirety. So for that reason, I don't like comparing Victor Wembanyama to everybody else before him who was 7'4". I just don't think that's a great comparison because he does not move laterally like those players. He does not pass like those players. His shot blocking instinct is different. His switchability on defense is different. He's all NBA defensive from day one. Period. End of story. I've gotten a lot of heat because, Jonathan, I don't know if you probably were watching the channel, but I came on the channel and I after the draft I said this is the worst place for Victor Wembanyama to get drafted. For me, for my enjoyment, because I wanted to see him immediately step onto an NBA team with talent around him. And I think the Spurs suck ass. I think their talent is horrific. I don't think it's just bad. I think it's literally the bottom of the league. I do understand the Popovich effect. I do understand Spurs culture, notwithstanding Josh Primo and some other players, but I think they get this, white, like they're like perfect in every way, but they're not. But I get all that stuff, and I get the structure, and I get that they're going to build nice and slow and steady, and they're going to take care of him and his body and not rush things because they've tanked in the past for Tim Duncan. But I got some heat because I said I think that sucks because I don't want to watch the Spurs play basketball because I don't think the Spurs have any good players. Their second best player is a 6'5" power forward named Keldon Johnson, and that to me is just not sexy and exciting. I would much rather him with Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren, Cade Cunningham, or go to Houston for God's sakes. You put that sucker on Houston with KPJ and Jalen Green and Şengün and Tari Eason and Jabari Smith. That's talent. Now,
it didn't happen. Thank
what's
God.
that?
Thank God that didn't happen.
I know where you stand on that. You just like Houston as much as I just like San Antonio. We need to do a side bet on which team you don't like watching Houston just because of the chemistry, but you would agree talent-wise, not even close between Houston and San Antonio. Okay, good. All right, let's go. All right, what's next? So we're on your number 7.
I have number 7, and this is probably going to shock you that this guy is this low. But I put the Admiral, David Robinson, as number 7 on my list.
It's going to shock me.
And really the only reason he was that low is because coming out of college, he played at Navy, right? And he didn't play against the level of competition that some of these other guys did. They weren't in national championship contention. Now, when you watch the guy play, and I'm pretty sure I remember watching him get 50 against Kentucky. I'm almost positive I remember watching that.
When there's nobody else to guard on Navy, like at all.
Like you could not argue that physically this dude was as gifted as anybody you had ever seen around the rim. And defensively, he was, outside of a couple of other guys that I've got on my list coming up, that was the golden era of college basketball defensive centers. Like it was incredible to watch. And he was an absolute freak. I just didn't get to see him do it against, those conferences, competition level all the time. And then I remember thinking, this dude's got to go finish his service too. So he's out for another year, or was it 2 years, or what it was?
I think it was 2, Jonathan. Yeah. Now, that's what I did. I probably should have called you and said, hey, how are we treating David Robinson in those 2 years of service? Like I ignored the 2 years of service. And so you're going to find him much higher on my list. If I knew that he had to take 2 prime years, age 22 and 23 off, then I probably would have him almost exactly where you have him. I've got him much higher. I remember this. Like in the thing about David Robinson is, just chew on this. The dude played 127 games. Okay, that's about 30 games a year, 4 years in a row for a not very good Navy team. He blocked 516 shots.
I know, man, and I get it. I thought about it, but god dang, think about who he was playing against.
Yeah, I know. Well, but it cuts both ways. If I recall, I'm almost positive Navy was like a 2 seed or a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. I'm almost positive, Jonathan.
Maybe. I don't know.
I might be wrong. I don't know. I wish there was a way to figure that out. Maybe I can click and figure it out. That being said, go ahead and name me another player in history that's played for Navy on his team or any other.
You won't.
That's how you know how good he is. And by the way, the answer to that is Darren Morningstar. Wow. Darren Morningstar played for Navy. 2 NBA players in history have played for the United States Naval Academy. David Robinson and Darren Morningstar. If you want to go impress your friends, drop Morningstar's name. Okay, so next on my list, I'll give you mine. Number 7 for me was Duncan.
1 second.
Yeah.
Another reason, and this is a key for my David Robinson being as low as he is. Okay. I remember watching them in the Olympics, and I watched Sabonis destroy him.
Grown man.
And I got it, but I'm like, okay. I mean, there are some things that he's going to have to do, to get back. Now, granted, I still thought he was a freak. Don't get me wrong, right?
Yeah.
You'll see why I had him behind a couple of these other guys that I had at the end of the
day. I got it. Yeah. Here, we're splitting hairs here. Like, our top 6 is going to be identical, and you put them in whatever order you want, and we're splitting hairs, man. I mean, you're talking about the greatest to ever do it. Yep. So that was my number 7 was Duncan. Your number 7 was David Robinson. Give me your number 6.
Was Patrick Ewing. I mean, he was Bill Russell, right? His team.
Ewing's my number 4. Just to give you a heads up, Ewing's my number 4.
He played for national championship every year, just about. He was the reason he got better offensively. There's just a couple guys ahead of him that I looked at. I was like, they're going to be better offensively than he is going to be. I remember thinking that, and so that's why I had him there. You could argue him being higher for sure.
Well, let's cut to the chase, because this is the question people are going to ask. They're going to, these 3 guys, they came I kind of have them all together: Ewing, Olajuwon, and Robinson. You've got Robinson 7.
Yep.
You've got Ewing 6, and you've got Olajuwon
4.
Okay, so we're close. I've got Olajuwon 6, Ewing 4, and I've got David Robinson at 3 because I wasn't as concerned about him playing at Navy, because I saw him play against real teams. So it cut the other way for me. It was like, if this team's relevant just because of one guy, and again, you know how I am, erring on the side of defensive certainty. I thought Robinson and Ewing were more of a sure thing pro prospects than Olajuwon, just by a smidgen, just because they were taller. They were a lot bigger to me. Like, Olajuwon was an undersized center. Was there any concern back then about Olajuwon being able to play center in the NBA? Like, because he's 6'10". A lot of people don't know this.
But they listed him at 7 feet, and we didn't know.
You used to lie. Now we would know, but back then it was like, well, we just, however tall we say he is. We don't actually measure him. We just ask him the question, hey, how tall are you? I'm 7'3".
Right.
Damn.
On is simple. I was enamored with him in college. Like, I thought.
Who, Olajuwon?
Olajuwon. I was like, oh my God, this dude is the biggest freak physically. Like, and I know he wasn't as tall as those guys, but like, I also remember watching. Now, this is post Phi Slamma Jamma. Like, Drexler was gone, Michael Young was gone, like these other dudes were gone. When they played Georgetown in the 85 championship game, and Georgetown, it's the only title that Ewing won, okay? But when they played them, Olajuwon was basically by himself.
Well, 84. It had to be 84. Olajuwon's done in 84.
So it would have been 84. Yeah, that's right. Right. Because they lost in 83 to NC State. That's right. So 84, they lose to Georgetown. And, dude, that Georgetown team was like the Knicks and the Pistons combined.
Yeah, I remember. I can name most of that team. Reggie Williams, David Wingate, Ewing.
Remember Michael Cajun? The dude was like a boxer, and you were he was afraid of him. And then he disappeared. Nobody knows where he is. But like those dudes were loaded, and he almost beat them by himself.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, this dude's taking on every. So, yeah, I mean, look, again, we're splitting hairs. I mean, we have them all in the same area.
Here's some numbers. Olajuwon wasn't. I just didn't see enough offensively. Like, I had just as many concerns about Olajuwon offensively as I did Ewing. Obviously, they were both amazing defensively, and Olajuwon was more elite defensively for longer probably than Ewing, but both were elite historical NBA defensive centers. And then their offensive game did flourish and did grow. But Olajuwon's, his second year, his next to last year, he was only 14 and 11. Right. It wasn't crazy, I don't know.
That team was loaded.
Yeah, I know. And that's the other part of it, is it cuts both ways. If he'd have played for Navy, maybe he'd have been 24 and 14. I don't know. You just don't know. But did you know he shot 67.5% from the field his senior year?
That I did not know. Yeah.
Holy shit. That's pretty serious right there. All right, so we've got the big three. We kind of talked through our big three: Olajuwon, Ewing, Robinson. Any argument can be made to put those guys anywhere, and each of them has, different little tiny, one-ups on the other one. And then when you put it all in a pot, you could spit them out anywhere between, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, to be quite honest with you. We've got all three of them in there. Who's your number 5? Was Olajuwon 6?
Sampson was 5 for me.
Samson was your 5. Okay, you got Samson higher, and I can see that because in that time, yeah, I mean, huge sample size, taller than anybody else in the league, pushing for national championships, national player of the year. Shit, I probably should have Samson a little bit higher. I can't have him higher than Wembanyama, though. See, I know you can because you have more certainty and more sample size and data, but like I just see Wembanyama do things. I mean, I've seen Wembanyama do things Ralph Sampson cannot do. He can't do these things. I know he cannot do these things. And nobody thought at the time he could do these things. So that's why I have Wembanyama higher. But maybe I'm more of a risk taker. All right, number 5, you had Samson. So we're on to your number 4. Oh, well, my number 5. Let me give you my number 5.
Yeah.
You're not going to like this because I know you're a big fan. I got Magic at 5.
Ooh, wow.
Yeah, you're going to have him at 3, I guess, or maybe 2.
He's 3 for me.
Yeah, 3. Okay, I can see that. I'm not going to sit here and argue with you. Again, I go back to size, and I go back to the way the game was played at the time. When Magic came out, whenever that was, 80, 79, 80, whatever. Yeah, 79. Big men ruled the world. And, and Magic was a point guard. And he was pretty damn good. And he had just won a national championship, and he can do everything. And I get all that. And, again, here we are splitting hairs between 5, 4, and 3. But I have Magic behind Ewing and Robinson.
Yeah, and Magic
as a prospect, right? I'm not, again, this is a tough exercise to forget what we know about Magic Johnson and his paper resume and all the things he did to change the league and to become the greatest point guard, or one of the 2 greatest, probably the greatest point guard of all time. To throw all that out the window and just go back in time, and all these dudes are standing in a room. You've got a 6'9" point guard over here who's moderately athletic at best, but unusual because 6'9" point guards did not exist, right, at all. He's 1 inch shorter than Olajuwon, who is a center, right? So you got that kind of weird argument, and you're like, I don't know if a 6'9" guy can play point guard. Obviously he can, and so can Penny Hardaway. But Ewing and Robinson, it's too much.
I got it, but I looked at it and said, Magic is a one of one at that point, right? Nobody had ever seen anything like him.
Nobody had ever seen anything like it.
If you go watch college highlights, he was more athletic, obviously, than pre-knee injury. Okay.
Yeah.
I think this is super underrated and not discussed. End to end when he was young, dude, he was as fast with the ball as just about anybody. I mean, I'm not going to put him in LeBron's category, but like he flew up the floor, right?
Yeah.
So I just looked at him as a one-on-one, and like, we've never seen anything like this dude. And you say, you're going with size. That's exactly why I have him number 3, because he's freaking powerful.
Positional size. Yeah, he was bigger for his position than Ewing and Robinson were for their position. You're right. I mean, it gave you a difference maker. I wonder what the talk was about if anybody ever said, I don't know who this guy's going to guard in the NBA. And as it turns out, he wasn't a great defender, but size does translate, and he more than made up for bullying the shit out of little guards his entire career, and just ushering their little ass up the court and getting to his spots and doing whatever the hell he wanted. I wonder if anybody did second guess that and say, well, this guy's too tall to play point guard. He can't guard anybody.
Guess whether or not he could play point guard. I mean, that was documented,
Yeah. I mean, how tall is James Worthy?
6'9".
Okay, well, there you go. Yeah, that's a power forward. He's your power forward. Your power forward and your point guard are the same height, But Magic in college was, I guess we should have seen this coming, and you're probably right. The argument could certainly be made, put Magic 3-2, not 2 or 1, but certainly 3, 4 for sure. He was 17, 8, and 7, and 17, 7, and 8. So I don't think there was any question that he was going to get to the league and be pretty damn franchise relevant right away from the jump, which is why he went number 1 overall. So,
by the way, 17 and 8 assists, no shot clock, no 3-point line.
Yeah.
So the game was much slower.
Yeah.
Just put those in a shot clock era. What is that? 25 and 12?
Yeah. Well, put it in this pace and space era.
So
yeah. Go look at Magic's NBA numbers. Put Magic's NBA numbers in today's era. Magic would be it would be absolutely ridiculous. He's one of those guys, it drives me crazy. I scream at the TV all the time when guys that have a a massive height and size advantage. Don't take advantage of posting up little people. That's one thing that, again, I'm not Magic Johnson, but Jonathan, I loved it when somebody put a 5'11" or a 6-foot guy on me. I would immediately go straight to the post. It was much easier for me to go take a 6-foot guy in the post and score than it would be for me to isolate a 6'6" guy on the wing. Those guys drove me nuts. I don't know about you, and you played at a higher level than me in Division I, but like, wouldn't you rather a 6-foot guard be on you than a 6'6" guy with length who might not have the same foot speed? Me personally, give me the post all day long. That's one thing Magic embraced. Like from the jump, man, even as a rookie, like he would just go in there and destroy people.
Yeah, and he did. He took that. He was one of the first guards with size to literally make that a weapon, and he used it as a passer as often as to score. So
Yep.
No question about it.
Yeah.
All right,
Genius,
so
man.
who's your number 3? Yeah, Robinson.
Okay, so my 3 was David Robinson. Remember, I went Patrick Ewing 4, David Robinson 3. I had Magic at 5, but I get it, man. The argument could certainly be made, and we could flip all those around.
We're gonna have 2 and 1 for sure. Then
2 and 1 in the same order. I got to believe 2 is LeBron, 1 is Shaq.
Yep.
Same exact order. What do we need to say about these two? Is there anybody out there watching this show who could reasonably make an argument that anybody other than these two should be 1 and 2?
Right. Well, no. If you went back further, maybe with Kareem, that'd be the only way you could.
Yeah. Post merger, you got Kareem and Wilt. Now it gets really fun. We took those guys out because we wanted to do NBA only post merger. Is there anybody out there that could argue LeBron should be 1 over Shaquille O'Neal?
You could, but Magic Johnson existed, okay, and you didn't know about LeBron against a little bit higher level of competition because of high school, right? But you could argue it because you could have said, even in high school, he's a combination of Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, Jason Kidd. Like you could say he's kind of all those things. And he at the time, well, still is, honestly, he's a 1 of 1, right? Shaq was a 1 of 2, but the other Shaq was the most gifted physical specimen that we may have ever seen in the world. And so you're like,
forget sports, just like alien shit.
This dude's the next Wilt, then okay. Even if he's 80% of Wilt, the biggest lock on our list has to be.
And we're not biased because we lived in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and got to watch all of his college games at all. We are not biased at all. But I've got Shaq 1 just because his floor there is no floor. His floor is everybody else's ceiling. And it rang true, and it proved true. And he stayed healthy enough to be one of the 3, 4, 5 greatest big men that ever played the game, one of the 10 greatest players that ever played the game. I have LeBron squarely at the 2nd greatest to ever play the game. But again, this exercise is not about who had the better career, right? I think we would both agree LeBron had a better career than Shaquille O'Neal, not by a wide margin, but better, I think. And I think the consensus would agree, but that's not what this is about. This is about if these dudes are sitting in a room, and you got to remember that era in 1992 where, the Orlando Magic are sitting there like, how are we going to win a title without a Kareem, a David Robinson, and that's what these guys, Brad Daugherty, to name one of your guys, but bigs. It's always been bigs. If you go back through NBA history, never had an NBA team other than, I'm thinking maybe Rick Barry. I'm trying to think of an NBA team whose alpha was not a big. It was always a team with a big, whether it was Kareem or Moses Malone or Wilt or Russell. I mean, just go add up all the titles that 7-footers had won. And in 1992, here's this 7'1" freak of nature who hasn't even scratched the surface offensively, who was certainly at the time, I mean, I think he was the most athletic 7-footer I had personally ever seen with my own eyeballs. You know what I'm saying?
For sure.
Yeah.
And I also think what would have been super interesting, and I know why they did it, and it ended up working out fine, but,
Dream team.
People don't remember that the Orlando Magic drafted Chris Webber the next year.
Yeah.
Right? And then they traded him for the rights to Penny Hardaway, which, again, they had a great run, but what would that have looked like? You know, it was too clogged up. You know, what does Chris Webber's career look like if he's playing with Shaq? You know,
Yeah.
So
Is
anyhow,
he Chris Bosh or is he Chris Webber? You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
whew, that would have been interesting for sure. That would have been interesting for sure. I just wish Shaq and Penny had stayed together and could have worked that out. But of course, then everybody wishes Shaq and Kobe could have stayed together and worked that out. There's a whole bunch of what ifs. My biggest what if is, and again, if you go back, you know, and we're old, we're 49. If you go look at the history of basketball, the most important year, and you can even say summer of basketball in my life was the 1992 summer in the Dream Team. That was my fondest memory of the sport of basketball from a spectator standpoint and just from a basketball historian standpoint ever. Can you imagine that it could have been so much better if Leitner had not been chosen and Shaq had been put on that team? Dude, yeah. Mind-blowing. Like, that's mind-blowing to think about. And again, Leitner was great and all that, but just imagine if Shaq had been in those in the documentaries, just with his personality around all those GOATs. I wonder what effect that would have had on a young Shaquille O'Neal and his development. And maybe he would have matured earlier, and maybe he would have made shit work out in Orlando with Penny Hardaway had he spent that summer with those veterans and they had gotten in his ear and kind of talked to him. Because Shaq was a very distracted young basketball player. I mean, he was a very distracted player as a young athlete. And, you know, that was always the knock on him is, does he really care that much about basketball? He's filming rap videos. He's doing terrible movies. You know, he wants to be a cop. I mean, what does he want to just get in the gym and lift and work out or whatever? Right. So I don't know. Yeah, we've got it. Okay, so there's our list here. I'll pull well, I can't put it up here yet. We got to do our 5 worst. Let's do our 5 worst quick. Yep. Let's do our 5 worst. We're at 1 hour and 10 minutes. Let's do our 5 worst quick right now.
I'll go ahead and list mine. How about that? I'm just going to list.
Let's list yours.
Okay. Number 1, Anthony Bennett. I don't think anybody can argue with.
Agreed. That. Anthony Bennett, number 1 on my list. Didn't do it. Wasn't expected to do it. Wasn't on anybody else's draft list at the top. Just completely out of nowhere. Had sleeping issues. Had sleep apnea. Was a little bit fat. Didn't really put up numbers in college. Played for UNLV, which was an afterthought at the time, you know, that he was playing in college. Nobody on earth expected Anthony Bennett to be the number 1 overall pick until the night before.
And he and my number 2, Michael Olowokandi, are both guys I didn't even know they existed when they were drafted. So that's my main reason.
Hold on, trivia question. Everybody watching, don't cheat. Do you know where Michael Olowokandi played college basketball? We know where because we've done the research and I actually watched the guy. I knew the guy did exist because I happened to catch him on a West Coast game late at night and looking at the guy and saying, God damn, that guy looks like Patrick Ewing. He's really tall and he's dominating. Of course, he's playing against a bunch of little children in this conference. But Michael Olowokandi played at the University of Pacific, which, Jonathan, if I'm not mistaken, was the alma mater for a great NFL running back who I was a big fan of. Do you remember?
What team? What team?
Pacific. Oh, the Chiefs.
Oh, that Okoye? Christian Okoye?
Yes. I'm pretty sure Christian Okoye played for the University of Pacific. I might be wrong on that. I need to check on that. But the Nigerian nightmare, Christian Okoye, yes. You have Olowokandi 2. I have Olowokandi 4. Splitting hairs.
Number 3 for me, and I was 3 years old when this guy came out, so I couldn't tell you honestly what he looked like in college. I just know I don't like him. I know Kareem, he cheap-shotted people regularly. He ran Larry Bird out of Indiana, Bloomington. And then so Kent Benson. But I'm glad Kareem decked him. That was it. So he's number 3 for me. Number 4 for me was Andrea Bargnani. Again, knew nothing about him, had no clue. And number 5, and ironically, because we're Jordan disciples, it's like, how can you say this about the guy? But one of the reasons why I knew this guy wasn't going to be successful was because
Jordan thought he was.
And that was May Brown. Yeah.
It's funny. We have 4 of the same 5. Okay, so that's not a surprise. Out with Benson and in with Markelle Fultz. Now, we didn't know about the thoracic outlet syndrome and the shoulder stuff.
6 of them.
He was number 6. Okay, so Benson was my number 6. And so I got Markelle Fultz 3rd. I got Kwame Brown 2nd because just like Anthony Bennett, this was a drastic deviation from the public perception. And I can't tell you, the sample size was nothing. He was the only one with a smaller sample size than Anthony Bennett. Because he had 1 year at UNLV. Kwame Brown had no sample size and really wasn't even the best high school basketball player. So it made no sense whatsoever. He must have had the greatest workout of God's, on God's earth for Michael Jordan one day to get that draft pick. I have Fultz number 3 for me because, again, he didn't really do it. He didn't dominate college basketball. I think people were enamored with his pull-up game. And he did shoot the ball a little bit better, obviously, than he did in the pros when he was in college. And I'll be honest with you, I am glad to see that he's flourishing and going to end up having a really good NBA career. The dude still can't shoot, but he's a very relevant player in the NBA, and I think he's going to end up having a pretty good career. And by all accounts, he seems to be a good kid, and he seems to really care, and he's fighting for his career, and I love to see it. So I hope he finds a home in Orlando, and I think Orlando's got a nice, young, talented roster. They're going to be a pretty freaking good team. They're going to make some good decisions. Olowokandi 4th for me, just because I did see him at least dominate, 1 year of bad college basketball, which is more than I can say for Fultz, Brown, and Bennett. They didn't. And then Bargnani 5th for me, just because back then foreign players, we just know shit about shit. No. And we knew he was tall and he could shoot it, but so could Matt Bullard. And so, Bargnani ended up being a pretty good, damn good NBA player, man. Not a great number 1 overall NBA draft pick, but a good NBA player. And Bargnani was a good NBA player and had a good career, made a lot of money. So that's my 5 worst.
That's it.
Let's share it here. Here's my list on the screen for you guys, so you can screenshot it and cuss at me or cuss at your screen or send me a nasty comment. Again, this was not easy. We even messaged each other a couple times and saying, wait, what are we doing again? What are we ranking here? And we're like, you got to take a time machine and pretend you don't know anything about these guys post-draft and just put yourself in the shoes if you were a GM trying to decide who your number one overall draft pick would be if all these guys were in a room in suits and they were waiting to be drafted. And, we agreed on 1 and 2, and then we were pretty damn close on 3 through 7, 3 through 8, just in a different order. Wembanyama was the sticking point. Let me know in the comments where you guys stand on Wembanyama. Of course, recency bias is easy. It's easy to get swept away when you hear some talking head say he's the greatest sports prospect ever. I'm not saying he's not. He's certainly in the conversation because he is an alien. He is a one of one, and we've never seen anything like it. But that doesn't always mean it's going to pan out or work out. So let us know where you are on Wembanyama. And then some of you guys are just going to be too old to remember, Greg Oden and how great he was in college, let alone Ralph Sampson, right? Because we're almost not old enough to truly appreciate Ralph Sampson. Because when he was doing his thing, we were like 7, 8, 9, 10, maybe something like that. Yep. So we weren't even getting to watch all of Ralph Sampson's games, and surely there was no internet or YouTube highlights or anything like that where you could do deep dives. So anyway, that's it, guys. That's our little exercise for the day. Thank you guys for watching. Jonathan, we've got to come up with another topic. We're making a list of topics. We're going to start getting back on the weekly regular. I am absolutely thrilled about the NBA season right there on the horizon. I know it still seems a long way off because we got football starting, we got Premier League soccer, but basketball is coming, and there's some dominoes that need to fall. Damian Lillard starts the season on what team?
Portland. I don't think they can make a move yet because that offer is not going to change very much. It can't change very much.
Yeah, it's got to be a 3-team deal. You can't come from Miami. They just don't have what Portland needs. It doesn't make any sense for Portland. What is your take on this? The culture's changed, right? It's a players' league, and it's almost a player entitlement situation. And Dame Lillard's been a consummate professional. This is the first time he's ever said, all right, look, enough's enough. Every year, it's the same bullshit, right? I don't have enough to do it, and my window is closing, and it is. I don't fault Damian Lillard, but at the same time, you cannot – it's not like Damian Lillard's playing for free, right? Damian Lillard is being compensated handsomely to play basketball for the Portland Trailblazers. And by everything that I've heard, he's going to show up and play his ass off for the Portland Trailblazers because he's under contract. So I don't think he should be demonized for this. But at the same time, I don't fault Portland for sitting tight because Miami has nothing that helps Portland. Because their window is going from win now with Lillard to win 4 years from now with Scoot and Simons and Shadon Sharp and apparently Jeremy Grant, who I can't figure that out. I don't know if they signed him to try to keep Lillard or if that's what pushed Lillard out. Like, why are you giving Jeremy Grant all this money? I need more than Jeremy Grant. I don't know. I don't know enough about it. But I think he starts the season on Portland, but I don't think he finishes the season on Portland, Jonathan.
I agree with that. I don't think he finishes there either, but I think Portland is, look, be smart about it, right? Keep him, make him stay, by basically not entertaining other deals. See if it works a little better than maybe he thinks it's going to. And then maybe you never know. He goes, oh, I'm good now. Let's stay. I'm in,
Who starts in Portland? You got 4 guards for 3 positions. Who starts in Portland? You going to put Anthony Simons on the bench?
No.
You going to put Shadon Sharp on the bench?
Yes, for sure.
Really?
You have to. He's the least proven. I think Simons eventually shifts to the bench. I don't think he starts the year on the bench. I think Scoot starts on the bench, and I think
you got a bunch of competing things. Yeah. Scoot appears to be too good not to play immediately. Right. Okay, and if he is your franchise, I don't think you rock the boat by not starting Scoot, especially because it looks like he's electric. We'll see how well he can shoot the ball consistently long term. We'll know after about 40 or 50 games whether he can really shoot it or not. He needs to be able to shoot the basketball. Otherwise, he's Antonio Daniels. And I shouldn't say that. You know what I mean. He's got to shoot the basketball to be an elite player in the NBA. He just does. So Lillard makes too much money. You're not sitting his ass. Anthony Simons makes too much money. You just gave him the bag. He's not going to sit the bench. Shadon Sharp had an amazing season. He was probably the best player on their team last year when Lillard wasn't on the court. And I hate to stunt his development because he's the only one of those guys that can even think about guarding the 3 position. Those guys are little. I don't think you can start Simons, Lillard, and Scoot Henderson. That's like, 18 foot 5 inches worth of players.
Yeah, I think Scoot Henderson starts the year coming off the bench.
I think you might be right. If I had to bet, I think you're probably right. Comes in, runs the show with the second unit, and probably is a shoot first, second unit point guard like we see, all over the league. So that'll be interesting to see. There's a lot of topics. There's a lot of stuff we got to discuss. Start writing some stuff down. Let's plan to do this again 1 week from today. And I'm excited to get the NBA season going, man. There's a shitload of stuff, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of stuff that needs to shake out. By the way, have you ever dripped warm pudding on your body?
No,
not recently. No. That's what these shirts from Homage feel like. Since the last time that we did a video, I don't know if you have heard, but I am now an affiliate sponsor with this company, Homage, right here. So if you see this little H on the sleeve of a shirt, homage.com. They do these NBA Jam shirts. I know you're a big NBA Jam. I used to hand you your ass in NBA Jam all the time as kids, right? First at the stand-up arcade games, when we were, 15 trying to grow mustaches and playing pickup basketball at 8.5-foot goals. We'd go take a break and play NBA Jam, and I'd give you the business. But these NBA Jam shirts are just one of many like pop culture and sports shirts that Homage produces. But Jonathan, when you pull these out, I know you're a T-shirt guy because we played AAU basketball, we coached AAU basketball, and the crappy fiber that doesn't stretch sucks. And so, especially with guys as muscular as we are, whose bodies are so tapered, you're going to want the types of shirts that are stretchy from day one. So these shirts feel like you've had them for 10 years, despite the fact that I just took the hologram off. And so they're paying me an exorbitant amount of money. I don't even know why I had you on the channel. I'm getting paid so much. I might just stop doing this and go buy my island, homage.com. I've got an affiliate link in my YouTube description. So click my link when you go buy stuff on homage.com for your significant other or for your kids. They'll love you for it. Jonathan, that's it. That's a wrap. NBA past and present, an hour and 20 minutes, which is par for the course with us, dude.
Yep. Hey, exciting time coming up. Season's going to be awesome. The most parity the league has ever seen coming up. And we've said that for the last 2 years. I think it's going to be even more this year. So stay tuned.
We've got a video coming up soon where we're going to do over-under wins for teams. And we're going to go through the whole NBA. We're going to look at FanDuel. We're going to see what their over-under for wins is. And then we're going to rank them in order of confidence. Like which one we're the most confident. If we were going to gamble $100 and we had to pick which one we would most want to put $100 on that we're confident they're going over or under. Basically, we're second guessing Vegas, which is always a good idea. It's just a great way to make money, right? Because they don't know what they're doing, but we do, sure. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Keep collecting. Stay positive in the hobby. The Grindfather is showing you the pinky, so it's time to go. And peace.